Okay, so I'm going to speak on text 23 of the first chapter, which I understand is the next one in line. Is that correct? And then afterwards, I'm going to give a little background on the Mahabharata. So I went through this already. It should only take about 40 minutes, something like that. So afterwards, we can have questions. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmityang Dena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Supadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Saminiti Namne Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. So beginning with the verse, Yuttimanan aveksheham ya etetra samagata dhatrashtrasya durbudher yudhe priyachigirshava. So again, a couple of times I'll go through it. Yotsimana naviksheham ya etetra samagata dhatrashtrasya durbudher yudhe priyachigirshava. Yotsimana naviksheham ya etetra samagata dhatrashtrasya durbudher yudhe priyachigirshava. So I'm going to skip the synonyms and go to a literal translation that I arranged here. These are basically the synonyms in English word order. So starting with aham, I, avekshe, want to see, ete, those. Oh, by the way, before I go through these, this is Arjuna speaking to Krishna, in case anyone new is on board here. So aham, I, avekshe, want to see, ete, those, yea, who, samagata, are assembled, atra, here, yotsimanan, to fight, chikirshava, desiring, priya, to please, durbudhe, the evil-minded, dhartarashtrasya, son of Dhritarashtra, yudhe, in this war. And here's a picture of Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield in the middle between the two armies. This is exactly what Arjuna wanted Krishna to do, to move the chariot between the two armies. So he says, let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. So I'll just stop here. Is everything okay? Anything I should do that's, yeah? We can't hear you, Atma.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Everything is fine. It sounds great.
Okay,
the video is good as well.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
So it was the purport by Srila Prabhupada. It was an open secret that Duryodhana wanted to usurp the kingdom of the Pandavas by evil plans in collaboration with his father, Dhritarashtra. Therefore, all persons who had joined the side of Duryodhana must have been birds of the same feather. Arjuna wanted to see them in the battlefield before the fight was begun, just to learn who they were, but he had no intention of proposing peace negotiations with them. It was also a fact that he wanted to see them to make an estimate of the strength which he had to face, although he was quite confident of victory because Krishna was sitting by his side. So again, Yotsimanan aveksheham ya etetra samagata dhartarashrasya durbudhe yudhe priya chikirshava. Now, I'm going to switch from this to Mahabharata. And I'm just going to read this. This is an article. Actually, I stole this article from the internet, and then I modified it and sort of made it a little shorter. It was already short, but I made it even shorter. And really, this is an overview of the Mahabharata. If you'll see here in the second, just down here in the second paragraph, it says 100,000 verses. So this is probably going to take 15 or 20 minutes to go through this. So you can imagine that there's a lot left out. So I'll start. The Mahabharata is an ancient Indian epic where the main story revolves around two branches of a family, the Pandavas, who are the sons of Pandu, and the sons of Dhritarashtra, who in the Kurukshetra war fight for the throne of Hastinapur, the city of the elephants, which is modern-day Delhi. Vyasa, who is himself a character in the epic, composed it. He dictated the verses, and Ganesh wrote them down. At 100,000 verses, it's the longest epic poem ever written. I read somewhere that that Iliad and the Odyssey together are something like 19,000 verses. The Bhagavad-gita is included within the Mahabharata. So the prelude is that Shantanu, the king of Hastinapur, was married to Ganga, the goddess of the Ganges. Now, this is a beautiful story, but unfortunately, there's not really time to get into it. But Shantanu, the king of Hastinapur, was married to Ganga, the goddess of the Ganges, with whom he had a son named Bhishma. When Bhishma became a young man, his father Shantanu fell in love with a woman named Satyavati. Now, goddess Ganga had gone back to the heavenly planets, so Satyavati. But Satyavati's father refused to let her marry the king unless Bhishma renounced the throne. So Bhishma wanted his father to be happy, so he agreed to the terms. He vowed to give up the throne and to remain celibate so that he would never produce an heir that might challenge the throne. In time, Shantanu and Satyavati had two sons, and Shantanu died after a short while. Bhishma and Satyavati then managed the affairs of the kingdom. So just to reiterate that, Bhishma, of course, being the older son who declared that he would be celibate, and his stepmother, Satyavati, then managed the affairs of the kingdom because Satyavati's sons were still minors. By the time the two sons, these two minor sons, reached adulthood, the older one had died in a skirmish with some Gandharvas, the heavenly beings. So the younger son, Vichitravirya, was enthroned. Now, to get brides for Vichitravirya, Bhishma abducted three princesses from a neighboring kingdom and brought them back to Hastinapur, the capital city, to be wedded to Vichitravirya. The oldest of these princesses declared that she was in love with someone else, so they let her go. The two other princesses were married to Vichitravirya, who died soon afterwards, childless. So here's a picture of Bhishma running off with the princesses in the back of the chariot with the whole city in pursuit. Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vidura. This is about their birth. Now, so Vichitravirya was childless, but so that the family line did not die out, Satyavati summoned her son Vyasa to impregnate the two queens. Now, Vyasa was Satyavati's son by the great sage Parashara before her marriage to Shantanu. Gets a little complicated, but if you're a little confused, don't worry, you're going to be more confused. So Vyasa, who was Satyavati's older son, now Vichitravirya had died, so there were these two queens, Ambika and Ambalika. So these two queens had produced no heirs to the throne. So according to the laws of the day, since Vyasa was Satyavati's son, he could perpetuate the dynasty. Sometimes the brother can marry the deceased brother's wife. In ancient times, that in many cultures that was found. So in this case, he was a stepbrother. So thus, the two queens, that is, the princesses that Bhishma abducted, each had a son from Vyasa. The elder queen gave birth to Dhritarashtra, who was blind. Now, there's a nice story about this too, but I'm not going to get into it. But those of you who have already read the Mahabharata, you can run the story in your mind. I like these little side stories, but we just have no time. The elder queen gave birth to Dhritarashtra, who was blind. And the younger one gave birth to Pandu, who was extremely pale. The sons of Pandu and the sons of Dhritarashtra are the main protagonists and antagonists of the Mahabharata, the entire epic. At the end of the epic, they fight on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Also of note is that a maidservant of the queens united with Vyasa and gave birth to Vidura. Now, Bhishma raised the three boys with great care. Dhritarashtra grew to be the strongest of all princes in the country. Pandu was extremely skilled in warfare and archery, and Vidura knew all the branches of learning, politics, and statesmanship. Dhritarashtra, the eldest, was bypassed for the throne because the laws didn't allow a blind king. Instead, Pandu was crowned. So Bhishma negotiated Dhritarashtra's marriage with Gandhari, who's from Afghanistan, and Pandu's with Kunti and Madri. So he had two wives. Pandu, who is now king, expanded the kingdom by conquering the surrounding areas, and he increased the royal treasury considerably. With things running smoothly in the country and with its coffers full, Pandu asked his elder brother Dhritarashtra to look after the state affairs, and Pandu retired to the forest with his two wives. Now, jumping forward, a few years later, Kunti returned from the forest to the capital city, Hastinapur. Her husband Pandu had died in the forest along with her co-wife Madri. And Kunti had with her 5 boys. The 5 boys were considered to be the sons of Pandu, although they were fathered by 5 different demigods. The boys' names were Yudhishthir, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. In the meantime, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari had children of their own, 100 sons and 1 daughter. Now, at the head of those 100 sons was Duryodhana. Duryodhana, as I indicated above, was the main antagonist of this great epic. And the 5 sons of Pandu, Yudhishthir, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, they're the main protagonists. I decided to do this, to to make this sort of simple presentation of Mahabharata because I once met this devotee in the airport. This woman, she worked for Rukmini. So many devotees know Rukmini. She's on the board of the Bhakti Center. Anyway, at that time, Rukmini had some shops and called As Kindred Spirits. So I was going through the airport. I stopped in one of the shops, and this woman she visited the temple regularly, and she knew about Krishna consciousness, and she knew different devotees that I knew. And then I said something about the Mahabharata, and she said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's this great epic and so forth." And I thought, well, maybe she knows about the woman who had 5 husbands. I mean, if somebody doesn't know about the woman who has 5 husbands, that's such a unique thing. And she said, no, she didn't know that. So that's why I decided that I'm going to talk about the Mahabharata. So here we are. The picture at the top, the Pandavas and Draupadi. You see, on the left, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5 Pandavas, and on the right is Draupadi, the woman with 5 husbands. Those of you who don't know what that is, we're going to find out. All the 105 princes, 105 means the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra and the 5 sons of Pandu. All the 105 princes were subsequently entrusted to the care of a teacher, Kripa at first and Drona later on. Now, Drona's school at Hastinapur attracted several other boys. Karna, who was not in the Kshatriya or warrior class, was one such boy. Karna later became an important figure in the epic. At school, hostilities quickly developed between the sons of Dhritarashtra and the sons of Pandu. Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, tried and failed to poison Bhima, the son of Pandu. Bhima was the second son of Pandu. Karna, because of his rivalry in archery with Arjuna, allied himself with Duryodhana. In time, the princes learned all they could from their teachers. The elders decided to hold a public skills exhibition. Duryodhana and Bhima had a mace fight that had to be stopped, mace or club, that had to be stopped because it got out of control. Karna, who was uninvited since he was not a prince, challenged Arjuna. He crashed the party. However, Karna was not allowed to participate because of his non-royal birth, which was a great insult to him. In response, his friend Duryodhana crowned him king of a vassal state. Now, questions arose about Dhritarashtra's occupying the throne, because all this time he'd been entrusted with the throne by Pandu, who had died. Though all this time he was still sitting on the throne, but all the young men were now adults. So since he was just supposed to be holding it in trust for his deceased brother, there was some question now about what was going to happen. So to keep the peace, Dhritarashtra declared the eldest son of Pandu, Yudhishthir, to be the crown prince. Now here's a little chart here. I separated it out. Let's see if I can find it here in my, what did I do with that? Here it is, a little bigger. Okay, so here's at the top, here's Shantanu, who married, first he married Ganga, and then Bhishma was his son. And then on the right, he married Satyavati, and Vichitravirya was born. And then Vichitravirya married 2 wives, Ambika and Ambalika. but not shown in this picture is Vyasadeva. So Vyasa came being his elder stepbrother by Satyavati. So Vyasa, because Vichitravirya then died, so Vyasa then united with Ambika to produce Dhritarashtra, so that Dhritarashtra was born, and then Pandu Ambalika. So on the left side, Dhritarashtra then married Gandhari, and they had Duryodhana and 99 other brothers and one sister. Pandu, here on the right, married Kunti and Madri, but he also died. Then Kunti had a special mantra where she could call demigods, and one demigod, Yamaraj, came, and Yudhishthir was born. Then from Vayu, Bhima, from Indra, Arjuna, and from the Ashwini Kumars, the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva. Now, Nakula and Sahadeva were born from Madri because Kunti used the mantra to call the Devas for Madri. Now, back to the story, the first exile. Yudhishthir was now the crown prince, and his rising popularity with the citizens was extremely distasteful to Duryodhana, who saw himself as the rightful heir since his father was the de facto king. Duryodhana plotted to get rid of the sons of Pandu. This he did by getting his father to send the Pandavas and Kunti to a nearby town on the pretext of a fair that was being held there. Duryodhana had a special palace built for them made of inflammable materials. In the epic, it's called the House of Lac or Shellac. He wanted to burn it down with them in it. The Pandavas, however, were alerted to this fact by their uncle Vidura, so they dug an escape tunnel underneath the chambers. One night, they held a huge feast and invited all the townspeople. At that feast, a forest woman and her 5 sons became so drunk and sick from overeating that they died on the floor of the hall. The Pandavas took the opportunity to set fire to the palace and escape through the tunnel. Later, the people discovered the bodies of the woman and her boys and mistook them for Kunti and the Pandavas. The word reached Duryodhana that the Pandavas were dead. Meanwhile, the Pandavas and Kunti went into hiding, moving from place to place and passing themselves off as a poor Brahmin family. They would seek shelter with some villager for a few weeks. The princes would go out and beg food, return in the evenings, and hand over the day's earnings to Kunti, who would divide the food into 2. One half was for strong Bhima, who was called Wolf Belly, because he was so voracious. His eating was so, he ate so much that one half of whatever they collected went to him. The other half was for the others, the other 4. Or I guess Kunti as well, the other 5. During those wanderings, Bhima killed 2 demons, married a demoness, and had a demon child. Again, this is a summary of all these stories. They then heard about a Swayambar, which is a contest in which a princess chooses her husband, that was being organized for the princes, or for the princess of Panchal, whose name was Draupadi. So Draupadi was going to select her husband in this contest. Now, according to their normal routine, the Pandavas left their mother at home and set out for alms. However, they decided to go to the Swayambar, where many princes had come hoping to win the hand of Draupadi. The conditions of the Swayambar were difficult. A long pole in the ground had a circular disc spinning at the top. On this moving disc was attached a fish, and at the bottom of the pole was a shallow pot of water. So an archer had to look down into the water mirror, use the bow and 5 arrows, and pierce the fish, spinning at the top. So 5 attempts were allowed. Now the bow was so powerful that most of the archers couldn't even string the bow. It was evident that only an extremely skilled archer, such as the now presumed dead Arjuna, could pass the test. So this is an old tapestry that shows the different persons attending the Swayamvar. But in the middle is Arjuna. You can sort of see at the bottom that in the yellow, in the blue, there's the fish reflected in the water, and then the real fish at the top. And Arjuna's got his bow with his, there's another one. I like these sort of traditional ancient sculptures. Shows the breadth and the, or I guess the depth in time of the ancient Vaishnava culture. One by one, the kings and princes tried to shoot the fish and failed. Some couldn't even lift the giant bow, and others couldn't string it. The sons of Dhritarashtra and Krishna were Karna, sorry. The sons of Dhritarashtra and Karna were also present. Karna picked up the bow and strung it easily, but he was prevented from taking aim when Draupadi declared that she wouldn't marry anyone who was a member of a lower class. So after every one of the princes had failed, Arjuna stepped up to the pole, picked up the bow, strung it, fixed all the 5 arrows to it, looked down in the water, aimed, shot, and pierced the fish's eye with all 5 arrows in a single attempt. Arjuna had won Draupadi's hand. Pandava brothers, still in the guise of poor Brahmins, took Draupadi back to the hut where they were staying. They said, "Mother, mother, come and see what we brought back today." Kunti said from the other room, "Whatever it is, share it among yourselves," which they did. She became the wife of all 5 of the brothers, or all 5 brothers became her husbands. So this is just a little picture that shows all the different places mentioned in the Mahabharata. It goes from the top left is Afghanistan, or today's Afghanistan, and then goes into Pakistan and all throughout North India. And on the upper right is, I think that's Assam, but these territories like Assam and Manipur, all the way down to Sri Lanka in the bottom. And a lot of these places are mentioned when Arjuna traveled. He traveled all over India. We'll hear that story. After the wedding ceremonies at Panchal were over, the Pandavas, their mother, and Draupadi returned to Hastinapur. King Dhritarashtra made a great show of happiness on discovering the Pandavas were still alive after all, and he partitioned the kingdom, giving them a huge tract of barren land to settle in and rule over. The Pandavas transformed the land into paradise. Yudhishthira was crowned king there, and he performed a grand sacrifice to establish his position as ruler. The new kingdom, Indraprastha, prospered. Meanwhile, the Pandavas had entered into an agreement among themselves regarding Draupadi. She was to be wife of each Pandava by turn for a year. If any Pandava was to enter the room where she was present with her husband of that year, that Pandava was to be exiled for 12 years. So once Draupadi and Yudhishthira, her husband of the year, were present in the armory when Arjuna entered it to get his bow and arrows. Now this was an extraordinary situation. It was an emergency. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but you have to read the book. It was an emergency, and he had to get the arrows, so it was a big dilemma. He just did it anyway. And Yudhishthira was going to forgive him, but a vow was a vow. He had to observe the vow. So he went into exile, during which time he covered the entire country and married 3 princesses along the way. Again, more stories that we're breezing by. Duryodhana became envious of the prosperity of Indraprastha and the power of the Pandavas. He invited Yudhishthira to a dice game and got his uncle Shukuni to play on his behalf. Shukuni was an accomplished player. In those days, the kings had to accept such a challenge. Thus, when they were invited, the Pandavas came along with Draupadi. Subsequently, Yudhishthira lost game after game because of Shukuni's expertise or his ability to cheat, one or the other. He lost his entire wealth, his kingdom, his brothers, himself, and even Draupadi. When it says his kingdom is his brothers and himself, it means that he basically sold himself into slavery or gambled himself. Draupadi was then dragged into the dice hall and insulted. There was an attempt to disrobe her, but Krishna supplied endless cloth, so they weren't successful. Finally, they had one last game. The wager was that they would either gain everything back or they would go on a 12-year exile, followed by a year incognito. Again, Yudhishthira lost, and they had to go into exile. This shows Draupadi being disrobed. On the bottom right, you see he's pulling off her cloth, and then Krishna is supplying. So this is the second exile. For this exile, the Pandavas left their aging mother Kunti behind at Hastinapur in Vidura's place, their uncle Vidura. They lived in forests and visited holy places. During this time, Yudhishthira asked Arjuna to go to the heavens in quest of celestial weapons. Remember, his father is actually Indra. So he was sent to the heavens in quest of celestial weapons, because by now it was apparent that their kingdom would not be returned to them peacefully after the exile. They would have to fight for it. So Arjuna did so, went to the heavens, and not only did he learn the techniques of several divine weapons from the gods, he also learned how to sing and dance from the Gandharvas. The Gandharvas are the heavenly singers, and the Upsaras are the heavenly dancers. I always thought Vishnu Chan was a Gandharva. After 12 years, the Pandavas went incognito for a year. During this 1-year period, they lived in the Virata kingdom. Yudhishthira became the king's counselor because each one of them inherited some godly qualities from the demigods. Yudhishthira was, his father was Dharmaraj. So of course he knew Dharma and he became the king's counselor. Bhima worked in the royal kitchens. Obviously he's Vrikodara, he is the wolf belly. Arjuna dressed as a eunuch and taught the palace maidens how to sing and dance. That was because when he was in the celestial realm, he learned how to sing and dance. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, worked at the royal stables, and Draupadi became a handmaiden to the queen. At the end of the incognito period, the Pandavas revealed themselves. There's so many little stories that we're skipping over. The Virat king was overwhelmed with happiness at learning who they were. Of course, they were famous. He offered his daughter in marriage to Arjuna, but Arjuna declined since he had been her dance teacher and he thought of her as a daughter. The princess was married to Arjuna's son Abhimanyu. Excuse me. At the wedding ceremony, many Pandava allies gathered to map out a war strategy. Meanwhile, Emissaries had been sent to Hastinapur to demand Indraprastha back, but the mission failed. Krishna himself went on a peace mission and failed. The sons of Dhritarashtra also gathered their allies around them. War became inevitable. Now here you see the battlefield with the demigods at the top. So in the Kurukshetra war, they all went to Kurukshetra and prepared for the confrontation. Arjuna, who had managed to get his friend Krishna to be his charioteer, asked him to put the chariot between the two armies so that he could see all the king's relatives and great warriors. And of course, that's where we are right now in the Bhagavad-gita, verse 123. Yotsyamana navekshehang yaetre tra samagata. He wants to see all the kings and those who are desirous durbudher. See the Dhartarashtrasya durbudher. See this Dhartarashtrasya means the son of Dhritarashtra, who's durbudhi. He has an evil mind. So Arjuna then became despondent and confused about what to do. He surrendered to Krishna and declared that he was now Krishna's disciple. He says, there's a famous verse, Karpanya dosho pahata subhava prichami twang dharma samudacheta yat shreyasyan nishchitam bruhitan me shishyastehang shadhimang twang prapannam. Arjuna says, Dharma samudacheta. He says, I'm confused. My mind is confused about dharma. Karpanya dosha upahata. Upahata means overcome with Karpanya dosha, with miserly weakness. And in the purport, I was just reading this, Prabhupada uses the word kripana. And kripana means miser and Karpanya means miserly. So Prabhupada says the kripana is somebody who's overwhelmed with things that are out of control, out of his control. And I was thinking, this is just like the virus. It's something that's out of our control. And people are just, after a week or so, they're stir crazy. It's what to do and what to think and who to believe, and do we blame the government for this, for the virus? Is it a conspiracy? Is it a, what's going on? So people are so upset about this, never mind that everybody has to die. So Prabhupada says this kripana is somebody who is confused and challenged by things that are out of control in this material world, which is everything. So the opposite of a kripana is a brahmana. So brahmana means somebody who knows Brahma, or the spirit, and who's self-realized. So kripana and brahmana. So the objective in life is to become a brahmana, to understand Brahma, or the soul, and to understand that the soul is unaffected by a virus. In response, so he asked Krishna to tell him what to do. Bruhi tanme. So he said, Bruhi, tell that to me. So in response, Krishna spoke the Bhagavad-gita, which means Bhagavat means Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gita means song. So Bhagavad-gita means the song of Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After Krishna finished his discourse, Arjuna agreed to fight in the battle for Krishna. The war raged for 18 days. The Pandavas and their allies had 150,000 chariots and as many elephants, 500,000 cavalry, and 750,000 foot soldiers. But they were outnumbered by Duryodhana's armies, Duryodhana and the allies, who had 250,000 chariots, 250,000 elephants, 750,000 cavalry, and 1.2 million foot soldiers. Huge armies. Casualties were extremely high. When it all ended, the Pandavas had won the war, but lost almost everyone dear to them. Duryodhana and all the sons of Dhritarashtra had died. The now dead Karna was revealed to be the eldest son of Kunti by the demigod of the sun. So this was from a contact before her marriage to Pandu. So I'll tell the story briefly that Kunti received this mantra from a sage who had visited her household. She was a young girl, but mature enough to sort of use the mantra. And so she received this mantra that would enable her to call a demigod. And so she used the mantra and she called the sun, the demigod of the sun. So the sun demigod appeared and he said, well, I'm here. You have to have a child by me. So she was upset. No, I can't. I can't have a child. So, but the child was born from her ear. Therefore, he's called Karna. Karna means ear. So he was revealed to be actually the eldest son of Kunti by the demigod of the sun. And thus, as her eldest, he would have been the rightful heir to the throne. So it was at the end, this all became revealed, and it's a huge irony in the Mahabharata, because all along, there's so many stories and there's so many subplots and side stories. It's just incredible. You can imagine this huge long epic. So at the very end, Karna, who was shunned by his natural brothers and who sided with the opposite side and who died, the great irony was that he would have been king. Grandfather Bhishma lay dying on a bed of arrows. We learn about that in Srimad Bhagavatam. Their teacher Drona was dead, along with many other dear friends and relatives. After the war, Yudhishthir became king of Hastinapur and Indraprastha. He was overwhelmed with grief that all of the destruction and death, and he performed a great sacrifice to atone for that. And I'll just mention that sacrifice is meant for atonement. And in the ancient times, even in Manu Samhita, sacrifice is prescribed. It's said that any householder who doesn't do sacrifice is like a dead body walking. So it's considered that householders naturally, when they're preparing food or when they're walking, they kill insects. Inadvertent killing. We go through life inadvertently. Well, of course, now in modern life, people kill animals without any problem. But even when trying not to be violent or to kill, there's inadvertent killing. So Manu says that you have to do sacrifice. And there were many ancient sacrifices, 5 of this type, 7 of that type. So 500 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prescribed this Sankirtan sacrifice, yajna. Sankirtan sacrifice is the glorification of principally glorification of Krishna's names, but also his leelas. In the Bhagavatam, throughout the Bhagavatam, there's a glorification of Krishna's leelas. Many leelas. Nrsimha, Vamana, Matsya, all these different incarnations, different leelas. And Chaitanya not only demonstrated his attachment to the holy name, but he also demonstrated his ecstasy or his overwhelming intoxication, actually, with the leelas of Krishna and Vishnu. So Pandavas ruled for 36 years, after which they abdicated. Parikshit, who was Arjuna's grandson, and in the womb at the time of the war became king. The Pandavas and Draupadi proceeded on foot to the Himalayas. As they climbed higher and higher onto the slopes, one by one, they fell on this last journey. I'm going to show one more chart here, just for fun. I took the other chart that we saw, this one, wherever it is. This one, this original one, that's sort of a plain vanilla one with the important kings showing their lineage. So I changed it a bit to try to show all of their wives, and these in yellow you see the demigods. So in the beginning, just to review, Shantanu married Ganga. Of course, that's a story in itself. Ganga being the goddess of the river Ganges. Excuse me. And a beautiful story. And they had a son, Bhishma. His name was Devavrata, but later he got this name Bhishma because when he renounced the kingdom, there was a sound Bhishma that came from the heavens, because he said he'll be celibate, he'll renounce everything and become celibate. And Bhishma means sort of terrible or awesome. This is a awesome in the sense of, not in the modern sense, but this was almost awful. This such a vow. So Bhishma, Shantanu then fell in love with Satyavati, who had already been united with Parashara Muni, and she had already, her son was already Vyasa. So Shantanu fell in love with Satyavati, and they had two sons, Vichitravirya and another son who died. And Vichitravirya then was married to two wives. Remember, Bhishma went to the neighboring kingdom and he kidnapped the two wives, Ambika and Ambalika. So he was married, but then he died. So what to do now? So Satyavati called on Vyasa. And because he was a stepbrother, then he could also mate with Ambalika and Ambika. And they had the two sons, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. So Dhritarashtra then married Gandhari. Bhishma arranged for him to marry Gandhari, and they had these 100 sons and one daughter. Then on the Pandu side, it became more complicated. Bhishma also arranged for him to marry Kunti and Madri. So he was a good king. The kingdom prospered. They went to the forest. Now the thing is, Pandu, there was he was unable to have sex. If he had sex, he would die. So Kunti, when she was a girl, as we know, she had this boon that she could call a demigod. So so Kunti called the demigods Dharmaraj or Yamraj, and Yudhishthira was born Vayu, Bhima, Indra, Arjuna, and then through Madri, Nasatya, one of the Ashwini Kumars, Nakula, and Dasra Sahadeva. So that's the antagonists, Duryodhana and his 99 brothers, and the protagonist, Yudhishthir, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. There we go, 15 minutes to 7. I just want to say very briefly, and then I'm finished, before we have questions. There are 2 projects that I've been working on. I'm going to go into the advertising here, advertising my projects. So I've been working a lot for some years on the environment, meaning the environment, the Vaishnava culture and the Bhagavad-gita have solutions to environmental issues, environmental problems. Now, this is my website called saveearthnow.info. And right at the top of the front page of the website is this booklet that you can download. It's a PDF. It's something like a 16-page booklet entitled Enjoyment and the Environment. And you can go through the booklet and see the points that I'm making. It may sound rather odd, the idea of enjoyment and the environment, but it's based on 2 basic principles. You can also watch these 2 videos. This one on the left is a 1-minute video on life-centric living, not human-centric. Now, I selected this terminology because it's based on some environmental terminology. Those people who know about deep ecology and ecocentric and biocentric and things like that, human-centric, these are common ecological terms. But what I mean here by life-centric is soul-centric. We're searching after the soul. And not human-centric, which means bodily-centric. On the right, elevated enjoyment, not exploitative. So that means that we have to come to we have to seek a different kind of enjoyment if we're going to get away from exploiting and killing in the world. We can't stop being greedy if there's nothing to replace that greed. So that's and I wanted to just point out, I found this article recently. This was recently published, 8 April 2020, relevant article in the BBC News. It says, the title of the article says, Coronavirus exploiting nature drives outbreaks of new diseases. So this fits right in with my theme here. And this is not some speculation that somebody has. It's based on it says, in the latest study, researchers trawled scientific papers for reports of diseases that had crossed from animals to humans, then combined this data with information on extinction risk compiled by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So this International Union for Conservation of Nature, going to Wikipedia, this is a recognized entity. And so it's not just some speculation by a few people, 1 or 2 scientists. These are based on studies that these kinds of diseases are based on environmental issues. So how much time? We have a little more than 10 minutes time for question and answers, but I just want to advertise this last thing here briefly. This is a project I just finished, memorizing 42 key verses of Bhagavad-gita As It Is, with the optional Sanskrit analysis. This is based on some ideas some things that Prabhupada taught me about teaching Bhagavad-gita, but also things that he taught others and things that from the very beginning of the time that I was an early devotee in sort of, I guess you would say, the Prabhupada era. These are things that I learned that I wanted to impart. So these 42 key verses I've taken from the Mayapur Institute of Higher education recommend 35 verses for Bhakti Shastri. Bhakti Shastri is recommended for those who want to be second initiated devotees. So the 35 verses plus another 7 verses that I got from another Bhakti Shastri program. So 42 key verses. And it's not just memorizing the verse, it's also learning the meaning of the verse, the literal meaning, and the essential parts of Prabhupada's purport. So you memorize 42 key verses in 42 days. There are 3 videos you see in the bottom part of the screen. The one on the left is 12 minutes, then 26 minutes, and 20 minutes. So the one in the middle is the optional Sanskrit grammar, which is not necessary, but if somebody wants to go deeper. And that's also on my website. I think that's it. I want to give some time for feedback, for question and answers, and I'll get out of all this maze here. So can I turn it back over to you, Prabhu, to moderate the questions? How shall we do that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Prabhu. Yeah, Dr. Sasha can, he's the technology expert over here. So he can, but I'll help assist if it's helpful. Yeah. So now, if it's if it's not already clear, this is the time for any of you to ask a question pertinent, please, to the discussion, the class by Dayananda Prabhu, and that can be moderated by Sasha and Dayananda. So if you want to speak, hopefully you know how to unmute yourself on the Zoom, so then you can just start, you can ask a question, or if you can't figure that out, raise your hand or something if you have video, that is, and then Sasha will see that, or I will, and unmute you for yourself. Hare Krishna. So please go ahead, go for it.
Hare Krishna, Dayananda Prabhu. This is Kurt. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my understanding is that when Maharaj Shantanu actually essentially set up Vishwavirya as his heir, what that in essence did is that was the beginning of the breakdown of Varna Ashram Dharma, because he did that based on lineage rather than based on quality. Whereas Bhishma would have been qualified, Devavrata would have been qualified because of quality as well as lineage, but because of the way that the succession happened, that was the beginning of the breakdown of Sanatana Dharma, such that, of course, today we don't, or not Sanatana Dharma, but Varna Ashram Dharma. Whereas today we really don't have Varna Ashram Dharma based on qualification. Is that accurate?
It's a good, yes. Is my speaker on?
Yes.
Yes, it is, Prabhu.
Yeah, that's a nice point. That's an excellent point. Actually, that's fascinated me for a long time. Prabhupada emphasizes that point, that a lineage, or yes, has to be based on good quality. Like there's this word Brahmabandhu, which means it's a son of a Brahmin, but not actually a qualified son. So there's a tension between lineage and just based on birth and based on qualification. And you'll find this in a lot of places of course, in business where they have to, I'm talking about in the modern world, in business where they have to be responsive to markets, sometimes like say for example the Ford company, you know, the Ford people, although they may not be qualified to take over the company, they always want to anyway. So they have to bring in people who are qualified. Whenever there's a succession. In Islam, there are the Shias and the Sunnis. One of them is supposed to be based on lineage, and the other one is based on qualified successors. So, I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but there's that basic issue, and it exists everywhere. So yes, it's a natural thing, and when it happens with Varnashram, it disturbs the Varnashram system. Sorry for the long answer. Go ahead. And Ridananda Maharaj gives a wonderful class. I remember hearing it years ago. He does this analysis about this. Something else?
One of the things that I really appreciate about the Mahabharata, and I don't claim to be an expert, but it really does give a sense of the dynamic of the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna. You get scenes of them, you know, lounging on hillsides and looking up at the stars together. You know, it really shows, you know, the depth of their relationship before the Bhagavad-gita. You know, so that
yes, exactly. The other thing about Mahabharata is that I find it a good background to Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not actually required too much for the Bhagavad-gita itself, but for Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, in the volumes that Prabhupada brought from India that he wrote before he came to the West, he included introductions to a lot of the principal characters in the first canto. So to read the Mahabharata is a good sort of background study to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Somebody else? Kurt, you talk a lot, I know. I'm sorry.
I have something.
I can insult Kurt because he's my buddy.
I have something. Because, you know, we have here in this, there's a lot of people here who have only read, you know, a little bit of Prabhupada's books or not much. And this is more like a lot of persons who aren't so familiar as some of us with, you know, the vast Krishna conscious teachings and literature. So I was wondering if you could explain why the five Pandavas and Arjuna and Yudhisthira, you know, amongst them Arjuna and Yudhisthira, why, or rather, how it is that they're fight, you know, wanting to fight to get back into their kingdom, into Prashta. How did that connect with their devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna?
Well, there's a couple of things that jump to mind. One is that, of course, this is in a previous age, Dwapara Yuga, but we shouldn't just sort of think of it as a common epic that just like any other epic, like Iliad and Odyssey, that these heroes are traipsing around or something, or there's a big war, Helen of Troy fighting over a beautiful woman, but this is a dharmic war, and this is an epic about dharma. In the Bhagavad-gita, you'll see the theme of dharma. If you look closely, you'll see throughout the Gita. In the beginning, Arjuna says, I'm confused about dharma. Dharma samudacheta. I'm confused, so what about that? And then Arjuna, throughout the Gita, explains about, periodically he mentions dharma. And at the end, finally, Krishna says, sarva dharman parityaja. So dharma is an extremely important theme. Krishna says, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. So when dharma becomes diminished, then Krishna appears. Yudhisthira's father was Dharmaraj. So we get lots of hints here that this epic goes beyond just a battle or just heroes and it's a dharmic message. Dharma sometimes I believe is, Prabhupada uses the word religion, but he uses the word religious principles. He also uses the word duty when translating dharma. I like the word responsibility. So you could say that dharma means codes, laws, responsibilities, principles, duties, the intrinsic nature of something, which would indicate the natural duty of something, the natural responsibility of something. So dharma is an extremely important word. And when Krishna says that he comes to reestablish dharma, it's a universal principle that he's talking about. He's saying that when dharma of the universe, of this world, or of the entire universe, he appears as Matsya, Kurma. When dharma diminishes, dharma is at the essence of the universe. I mean, we think of the universe as atoms and quarks and whatever components, but really the basis of the universe is dharma. Dharma means also to maintain. So the universe is maintained by dharma, by principle. And in science, there are the principles of physics, but dharma, it's dharma. So Krishna appears when some abnormalities occur, either by the humans or the demigods or in whatever case. So this epic, although we consider Srimad Bhagavatam to be on a higher level than the Mahabharata, this epic is a fundamental epic to understand about dharma and the principles of dharma, and the fight is a dharmic fight. And if we take it as that, then we can begin to understand. The higher understanding is the lila aspect, but that dharma aspect is the fundamental understanding. Is that good enough? A little long, my answers are a little long.
That was very, very nice. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I appreciate it.
My name is Markandeya, and I have a question. And it's a question I never got a chance to ask Prabhupada when I met him in New York in the 60s. It has to do with the disrobing of Draupadi. I've always wondered, because it takes place in the presence of Kripa, the court sage, Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, and I'm not sure if Drona was there or not. But it always shocked me that none of them stood up for Draupadi when the attempted disrobing took place. And it was only when Gandhari came in and castigated Duryodhana and Dushasana, as well as the whole court, when they finally got embarrassed by what they were doing. Could you comment on why you think somebody as noble as Bhishma and as noble as the sage Kripa did not intervene during that horrendous incident?
Well,
So it's bothered me.
in that age, maintaining one's vow was higher than anything. We have trouble as devotees, as disciples of our gurus, maintaining our vows. We struggle throughout our lives, but these great souls, they maintain vows. Like Arjuna they had a vow about, I was just reading just now that they had this vow that Draupadi would be, if Draupadi and the husband for the year was in a room together, one of the other four husbands couldn't enter the room, and in an emergency situation, Arjuna had to enter. And even though Yudhishthira forgave him, he said, "Oh yeah, no, this was an emergency. You don't have to go on the 12 years." So he went anyway on the 12 years. So these vows that these great souls, their vows were so significant to them and to the world. I mean, they thought, not thought, but that was part of dharma, that you have to live up to your vow. So Bhishma was bound to support these Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, and even though he was a devotee of Krishna, and in the battle, there's a beautiful interaction between Bhishma on one side and Krishna on the other, and it's, in a sense, for us, it sets up a tension. I love the tensions within the stories in Mahabharata and also in Srimad Bhagavatam. If we look for the tensions, we're here in this material world and we love tension. When I put up something on the internet, some like little Krishna conscious thing that I've tried to write, because there's no tension in it, it doesn't attract much interest. I get a few likes. But if somebody puts up a controversy, something that's controversial, oh, did you know that such and such devotee did this? Oh, some devotee who did this thing, and it's not proper. So immediately gets a lot of attention. And if you look in the world, the fiction, if you don't have conflict, if you know anything about writing fiction or writing anything, they say, whatever you have, conflict, conflict, conflict. Everything has to be conflict. So we thrive on it. We can't live without conflict. So here's an introduction. In all these stories, here are introductions of conflicts within the, either on a much higher level. Mahabharata is a much higher level, and Srimad Bhagavatam is on the pure transcendental level, discussing all the conflicts that exist between Kurma and all the demigods and fighting with the gods, and Kurma comes and appears, and Lakshmi appears, and all the demons steal the poison, and Moni Murti steals it back, and all these conflicts, wonderful, wonderful conflicts, and Krishna and dealing with the demons, and even Radharani and different camps with Chandravali and Radharani with these incredibly sublime, loving conflicts. So the conflicts exist, and not that we should misunderstand that these personalities, we can't bring Bhishma down to our level and criticize Bhishma. These vows that existed, we can't follow vows. We struggle, and here we are in this age. So we can't misunderstand that this was some fault. On some higher level, there may exist a fault, but it's actually none of our business to look from that perspective. We can only look from our perspective and see the positive aspect, that here is the tension that's so wonderful for us, and it's a higher level tension that's to attract us to, just as I mentioned in the solution to environmental problems, if we're attracted to a higher enjoyment, these kinds of tensions are meant to attract us, and we're meant to enjoy these things.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Anybody else?
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I just had one question regarding, we see that the four principles, that is austerity, mercy, truthfulness, and cleanliness, they have been broken from one age to another. And in the Kali, they say that in Kali Yuga, the last principle, which is truthfulness, would be broken. But we see in Dwapar Yuga, Yudhishthira Maharaj engaging in like gambling and all those things going on, which is like the opposite of truthfulness. So how do we understand this?
You know, the first thing that, this is not a direct answer to your question, but the first thing that comes to mind when I hear truthfulness is that at one point, I think it was in Hawaii that I recall this, hearing the conversation. Prabhupada was talking with some of his leaders, and this is after the movement had matured some years, and maybe 1976, something like that. Prabhupada departed in 77, and he had many disciples, and he was concerned about those who were getting Brahmin initiation. He said, you know, we have many disciples, and let everyone come and be initiated as a chanter of the holy names of Krishna, but somebody who's a Brahmin should be more qualified. And one of the things he indicated, he wanted his disciples to be educated in the literature, but one of the natural qualities that he was looking for was truthfulness. He says, if you find somebody who is truthful, then that's a good natural quality. I'm paraphrasing because it's many years ago since I read that, but I really marked that you're absolutely correct in saying that even truthfulness has diminished, even though it's supposed to be one of the things in this age that remains. But there may be a small section of truthfulness who have this natural ability to be truthful and honest. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Maybe one last question, if someone has one. I think, and then we can have the kirtan. Miguel, go ahead.
I have a question. This is Gloria. Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to thank you for a very enlightening discussion and lecture. And thank you for your work with environment. I think it's crucial. I think in a way, we have violated the Dharma ourselves on earth. And it seemed to me that what we are going through now is we're having our own war with this virus because we have violated the intrinsic laws of Dharma. So in a way, we're having our own Mahabharata, metaphorically, with what we're experiencing. And I thought it was very interesting what you explained about Dharma and how it relates to Mahabharata and how important it is to respect the intrinsic laws of Dharma. And I think we have violated them with nature. And that's what we are experiencing now, the result of that.
Yes, good point. Good point. But we as Vaishnavas, there's a saying paradukha dukhi, meaning that the paradukha, meaning the suffering of others, is my suffering. Dukhi, I feel the sufferer of the suffering of others. So we are meant to be concerned about humanity, but at the same time, humanity goes its own way based on karma, based on the previous acts. And yes, in our age, there's certainly a violation of dharma, the intrinsic nature of things. We violate dharma at every step, meaning we as a society, as a modern world, as a global society, but as individual devotees, we have to save ourselves. We have to become self-realized and Krishna-realized. We have to develop that quality in ourselves to be able to save others, actually. So, yes, concern for humanity, but we have to save ourselves first. Otherwise, humanity will take us down. Just like a person who's drowning, you have to be very careful because the person will drown you.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, you start with yourself so you can help others.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.